Hello, Susanna Sweeney here, accredited psychotherapist with the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, clinical hypnotherapist, international certified Havening Techniques trainer and practitioner. And what I want to talk to you about today is comparing Havening techniques to psychotherapy, because people find that very difficult to understand often what the relatively novel Havening techniques are all about. And I'm hoping this video will be helpful for you in that regard. We'll be looking at how they each work, their strengths, their limitations, what the differences are, and what results you can expect from each. So I want to kick it off with this statement: everything has its place. So both psychotherapy and Havening techniques have a very concrete function. One is not better than the other, but each serves a different purpose, which corresponds to the different stages of somebody's healing process. So to be very clear as well, Havening techniques are not a psychotherapy system. It's a relatively short training in a psychosensory modality that does not necessarily make somebody a therapist unless they have other training under their belt already. So the essential premise here is that psychotherapy and Havening techniques each work with different parts of the brain. So they do completely different things. By and large, we can argue that psychotherapy addresses primarily the cortex, which is home to rational thinking, home to ordinary memory. It's that outer layer of the brain. Psychotherapy, of course, it depends what kind of training somebody has in particular. There are some methods like sensory motor psychotherapy that I'm trained in that dig that little bit deeper into working with trauma symptoms through the body. But what's lacking there is an understanding of how the brain actually works. And because it's still being addressed through talk, the cortex will always be the primary part of the brain that's active here. That's my opinion about this. Somebody might very well disagree with me. My opinion is based on my experience of working with trauma for the last over 25 years. Havening techniques, in contrast, address primarily the amygdala. So you can see the tiny little red dot there in the center of the brain that signifies the amygdala, where traumatic memory is processed and stored. It also addresses other parts of the limbic system that are associated with our survival responses, with fight or flight, with fear, with emotion. And the limbic system, one of its main functions is about survival. So the memories that are encoded there for a particular reason, to help us get through those difficult moments in life. And when they are accumulated in there over long periods of time, that's when they can start producing symptoms. And that's what Havening techniques are targeted to do. They work with this particular mechanism and these particular difficult symptoms. So in psychotherapy, by and large, I think it's fair to say that when you are in psychotherapy, you very well may experience changes in the deeper layers of the brain, especially when you're working with a therapist who has specific training, maybe even around neuroscience. I don't know, maybe that's available these days, maybe through somatic experiencing or sensory motor therapy. But by and large, there is a lack in the psychotherapy world of tools for pursuing working with the deeper levels of the brain in a targeted way. While Havening targets specifically those sites where traumatic memory is stored, so that we can convey a message to the brain that it is safe now, and hence we are able to change how memories, be they cognitive, be they emotional, be they somatosensory, are filed away in the brain. Namely, what we do is that we lower the priority at which these memories are filed, so they very well may be filed in the cortex afterwards, as any ordinary memory would be, when they are no longer deemed crucial to survival. Psychotherapy, what are some of the strengths and what are some of the limitations? Psychotherapy is very useful when you really need to talk things through, and it can often be useful in life to have a witness. For some people, it is so important to tell their story, maybe for the first time ever, and to have somebody who will validate their experience. Psychotherapy is also useful for reflection, for developing self-awareness, maybe an understanding of one's patterns or how one functions as a person. And these are all things that I would say, by and large, take place in the early stages of someone's process as we start becoming curious about ourselves. And in those stages, psychotherapy can be the perfect fit for someone. Limitations. Well, I think with most psychotherapy approaches, it is fair to say that psychotherapy comes to the limits relatively quickly when it comes to intense emotions and disturbing symptoms. And that will be the case in particular when the training the person has lacks tools around supporting those. And unfortunately, that can create a scenario where people are left with a feeling of having stirred up material and nothing has changed, nothing has improved after those few sessions of therapy. And unfortunately, they feel too uncomfortable often to pursue psychotherapy long term. And here I've actually changed the headline, as you can see, to long-term talk-based psychotherapy. The reason being that when you are looking at outcomes in psychotherapy, you really are looking at having to pursue this process for a longish period of time, at least a year or two, until you can see substantial improvement. And then you can expect a better understanding of yourself, of your history. You can expect clarity on your own patterns and your own issues. You can expect better coping skills, either in general or for specific situations. And again, that's a very broad statement. It all depends on the particular training your psychotherapist will have. You can also, if your therapist has the right training, expect some improvement with trauma symptoms. For example, toxic emotions may be reduced in intensity. If that is the case, then you may very well experience more joy and more positive emotion and higher levels of resilience alongside. There are some other trauma symptoms that, in my experience, are very difficult to change with psychotherapeutic tools alone. For example, chronic pain, migraines will fall into that bracket, and some other somatic symptoms. Havening techniques, what are some of the strengths and limitations? Well, you are looking at a change work modality here. You're not there to talk about your issues. You are there to use very particular tools in a facilitated session to make changes. And psychosensory means you're working with touch. So when I work with clients online, that will be self-applied touch. You can get relief from the disturbing symptoms that you're experiencing very, very quickly with havening techniques in a short course of sessions. Those changes will be permanent and they happen really fast. Havening is also very useful for resilience building. In fact, the toolkit contains particular tools for resilience building. We don't often use them with trauma work, but I certainly focus on them at the end, towards the end of someone's process. The main emphasis will be on those. Limitations. Well, if you are looking for psychotherapy and the support of a well-trained and well-experienced practitioner, then you will have to look for the particular combination of a psychotherapist who's also a havening techniques practitioner. They are two very separate trainings. Havening techniques is a short training. Psychotherapy training can go on for years. So the havening toolkit does not contain self-awareness tools, but these self-awareness tools, of course, can be used alongside, either plugged in to the process by a trained practitioner, or you can use them at home on your own. Expected outcomes after a short program. It would be very reasonable to expect a substantial reduction in symptoms. So things like toxic emotions, chronic pain, addictions, low esteem, low confidence, anxiety, low mood, depression, and many, many other types of difficult to treat symptoms can change relatively quickly with havening techniques. And as these symptoms are decreased in intensity, resilience will increase alongside. And so will the positive emotions, so things like joy, peace, excitement. That's it from me on comparing havening techniques to psychotherapy. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful.